Welcome to Success Story, the most useful podcast in the world. I'm your host, Scott D. Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot Podcast Network and the Blue Wire Podcast Network. The HubSpot Podcast Network has incredible podcasts like My First Million. My First Million is hosted by Sam Parr and Sean Puri. They feature famous guests. They discuss how companies made their first million and then some. They brainstorm new business ideas based on the hottest trends and opportunities in the marketplace. Here are some of the topics they talk about. If you like any of these, you will love the show. 3 profitable business ideas that you should start in 2022. Drunk business ideas that could make you millions. Asking the founder of Grammarly how he built a $13 billion company, or SaaS companies that anybody can start. If these topics are up your alley, go check out My First Million. Listen to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Today, my guest is Andy Paul. He is a sales professional with more than 30 years experience as a VP sales executive in multiple companies ranging from Fortune 1000 to technology startups. As a founder and principal of the Sales Action Group, he's consulted with numerous CEOs to help them optimize and modernize their sales process. He is also the host of Accelerate Your Sales. It is the #1 sales podcast with over 2 million downloads to date. He's the author of Zero Time Selling and Amp Up Your Sales. They are both Amazon bestsellers. He's the author of the upcoming novel Sell Without Selling Out. He is a top sales influencer. He has 200,000 followers. #1 sales podcast, number 8 on LinkedIn's list of top 50 global sales experts to follow. Needless to say, he has some opinions about sales. So what do we speak about? So we spoke about some of the concepts in his upcoming novel, upcoming book, Sell Without Selling Out. We spoke about how sales hasn't really progressed that much in the past 30 years from the days of ABC, always be closing. What has gone wrong? Why are sales reps not more potentially ethical or not as productive as they should be in a modern sales environment? We spoke about what selling out means, listening to the old sales dogma and why it won't move the needle on sales. It won't help you if you're a sales manager, a traditional sales rep, or an entrepreneur. We spoke about the issue with persuasion. It's a blunt instrument. It's a last resort instrument that sellers use when they don't know how to influence properly. And then we spoke about what sellers should be doing in a modern sales environment. So how to sell in and not sell out, how to focus on connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity, how to be a top performer, how to focus on being productive in a sales environment, how to make sure that you're still meeting and exceeding all your numbers, all your revenue without creating a really poor buyer's experience. So this is a masterclass on the future of sales. It should be what sales is, but the future of sales, where sales should go, and what a sales organization, sales process, and sales experience should feel like. So this is Andy Paul. He is the author of Selling Without Selling Out.
Yeah, my first sales job was selling women's shoes at JC Penney's as a high schooler. So that was a stark introduction to sales. And I mean, it's in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was a holiday fill-in. And so my first day on the job in late November is the first major snowstorm of the season moved in, and this was the sign for every woman within 30 miles to come to JC Penney and buy their winter boots. So literally the first day I was, I forget how many people, dozens and dozens of customers that I was serving. And I knew how to do the foot measuring device and so on. But yeah, as a 16-year-old boy who was thrown into the deep end of touching women's legs and feet to help them into the boots, it was sort of an interesting day.
That was your first sales gig. That was your first job. Was that your first job?
First sales gig. No, I was a lifeguard and swimming coach and so on during the summer.
All right. So what made you eventually go down this career path of sales?
Just fell into it like many people. Yeah, I graduated from college. I literally had no job plans at all when I graduated from college. I spent the summer working at the university. I went to school and sort of got to the point where they offered me a full-time job. I thought, nah, I don't want to work here. So I went over to the Career Placement Center, and there were jobs from all these big, at the time, big tech companies, IBM, Xerox, Burroughs, which is the second largest computer company, HP, and so on. And said, so what the heck? Of course, they didn't call them sales jobs. That was the thing that was interesting. They were all marketing management training programs. So they very, very carefully didn't mention anything about sales. And it wasn't until I really sort of got into the interview process that I thought, oh, yeah, this is really a sales job. Oh, well, let's try it. I had nothing else going on at the time.
What was, when you walked into these marketing management training programs, what was sales? What was sales then? Because I'm going to showcase that dichotomy and the absolute difference in what sales is now.
Well, so for us in the company I worked for at the beginning, it was about cold calling. And so we had to sort of serve an apprenticeship where we sold, at the time, the company I was with, Burroughs, there was a big mainframe computer manufacturer and so on. Is everybody had to start off by selling, they had these legacy products that were these desktop adding machines about the size of small microwave ovens. And they were hugely overpriced for the time because they were selling for, let's say, roughly $300 a unit. And you could go to your local office supply store and buy a handheld calculator for, $50 or $60 at the time. So we had to go out and sell a certain amount of that product, like $5,000 worth, before we could get approved to go get trained to sell computer systems. So we got a little bit of 2 weeks of sales training and then thrown on the streets and just prospected. So I was in the Bay Area. I was based in Oakland. I'd drive to the East Bay Area. I'd drive to Fremont, Union City, Hayward, somewhere. I'd park in a business park. I'd get out, lock the car, and with the desktop adding machine under one arm and my flip chart portfolio under the other, I'd go cold call. 20, 30, 40, 50 cold calls a day.
And how were you trained originally on how to close a deal when you did this cold calling?
Well, yeah, it's something I deal with in my new book. Is
I know
so
you
I've been on the job about a week or two. We got sent to one of our national training centers. In this case, it's in Pasadena, California, and 2 weeks of sales training. And a lot of it consisted of watching a series of videos put on by this, I call him a slick-haired con man sales trainer, a guy named Lee DuBois that maybe some people still hear of. It just sort of made my skin crawl watching him. And then, endless sort of role plays and some product knowledge training, but a lot of role playing, a lot of watching Lee DuBois sort of bluster his way through objections and so on. And I did not identify with that at all. And it made me think, I'm not sure this is for me because, everybody was trying so hard to be salesy, right? I mean, this is everybody was like, you had to put on a hat and a costume and be like a used car salesperson. And that just wasn't me. And apparently the instructors of the class thought so as well, because they told my manager after the fact that they thought I should be fired because I wasn't salesy enough. I was too analytical. But it just sort of gave me the determination to say, well, there's got to be a way to do this, to make sales work for me. And it was really almost from the beginning that I sort of determined that, I'd find a path that worked for me, that would enable me to succeed in this profession, even if it was just something I alone did.
Why would you want to? Because I feel like your current version of sales and what you do speak about in your book, and we'll get into that later, but that version of sales is more a modern way of looking at sales. It's a much more modern lens of what sales is. What's curious to me is why you went against the grain when sales, I don't want to put a timestamp on it, and God forbid, I don't want to date you at all, but like X years ago was
right.
a very much of a cold calling, ABC, used car salesman, all the negative stereotypes that you associate with sales. A lot of that came from a certain culture that's evolved and progressed and become a lot better. But how did you?
The question
has it become? That's another question.
See, I would argue it hasn't, and so I would make the case.
Really?
I do make the case in my book is that I think that actually it's become worse. I think we went. I think that that the sort of over reliance on process and technology, in an effort by many in sales to want to sort of take the human out of the equation, has sort of amplified these bad behaviors. The pitch first, listen to respond rather than listen to understand, just the lack of any sort of making connection with another human being, understanding that your job is to be there to help help the buyer understand what's most important to them, as opposed to just pitching and flogging your product. To me, the underlying behaviors are the same. And in fact, I think we've amplified the impact of it with technology. And I think that on top of that is, when we look at what's considered sort of modern sales processes, as long as we still have these linear stage-based processes that we have and that are embedded in CRM systems and people's processes, they haven't changed for decades. They're the same fundamental sales process: initial call, initial qualification, demo, presentation, proposal, whatever the order is. If you Google it, the modern sales process, same one I was taught decades ago. Now we've got ways to facilitate it. Excuse me, that didn't exist before. But one of the things I find fascinating, and this is not something that a lot of research has been done in, but I think needs to be looked at, is I firmly believe that the sort of base level productivity of an individual seller today, despite the technology, is no greater than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And by productivity, what I mean is, I define it a specific way, which is the amount of revenue generated per hour of actual sales time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's no data that exists to tell us that it's gotten better. And so if we look at the proxies, like, knowledge worker productivity increases and so on, is what we see. And Paul Krugman has written about this several times in the New York Times. We saw improvements sort of through the advent of email and high-speed internet. But in the last 20 years, the level of productivity increase among knowledge workers has basically been kind of flat. So we have to assume the same is true with sales.
But we are talking about, that's a very interesting point. But productivity versus ethical or customer-focused sales, those are two very different conversations.
Oh, sure.
So with the increase in technology, you could argue that you could be ruthless and you could be persuasive and you could be guiding somebody down the sales cycle, but just doing it more efficiently. Alternatively, the other conversation could be, well, okay, productivity is one thing, but how do we sell better? How do we be more ethical salespeople? Because your argument stands that we haven't become that much better in the past 20 to 30 years. And that's interesting to me, because you cannot be denied that the sales cycle, you do your, you top of funnel, you do your discovery, and then you sort of get them through all the way through to negotiate, proposal, negotiation, close, all the different steps in sales cycle. Yes, that it's an easy way to teach over sales. What I want your opinion on is whether or not you feel as though there's more of an intent focus, or almost like an empathetic approach to which customers should continue on to the next path in the sales cycle. Whereas if there is no empathetic, cognizance of is this customer right, then it's just ruthless, move you on to the next sales, next step in the sales cycle, then close you. So do you think the sales process is the issue, or do you think it's the fact that the people that are guiding customers through the sales process are not being empathetic to the actual needs of the customer? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there are lots of points in there. So one is I don't think that sellers today are any better or worse in terms of their interactions with buyers than they were before, and I think that's problematic, right? I think we're
agreed. Yeah, 100%.
And surveys such that people have done, which again, I don't believe are hugely scientific, but from Gartner and Forrester and others, saying wow, buyers don't want to deal with sellers anymore.
And they still don't.
Yeah, I don't think they ever did, quite frankly. What
Yeah.
they do is they want to deal with a seller who can help them achieve what they're trying to get done, right? To help them, define the problem and define what's the best outcome for them and help them get that. A buyer wants to talk to a seller who can do that. But what this data is coming back and saying about buyers not wanting to talk to sellers reflects the fact that they're not getting any value from those interactions. So to me, that argues the fact that we're not getting better. We're not necessarily worse, but we're not getting any better in that dimension. And now technology enables buyers to do more of it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, they're saying, in the absence of value from a seller, I'm going to proceed myself. And so I think that is really sort of the crux of the matter, is we're not creating these buying experiences for the buyer that make someone invest their time and attention in us as sellers.
Okay, so then, I was going to say, to follow up on that, so then is the buying experience, is the issue with the actual sales cycle, or is there another component to the buying experience that we could do better?
Yeah, I think it's to your point about, we don't focus on making the connection at the human level that we need to do. We don't focus on being intentional about how we build trust, because we're so animated and driven by our process, right? And meeting our metrics, our activity metrics, and so on, that we put sellers in a nearly impossible position. I mean, think about it. It's not uncommon, let's say, in the SaaS world, for an AE to have a requirement to have a 5x pipeline coverage in their pipeline for their number. Well, what most sellers and sales leaders don't understand is, if that's the case, then your win rate, meaning the percentage of the opportunities you close out of your most qualified opportunities, is going to be the reciprocal of your pipeline coverage ratio. So if you say we need 5x coverage, you're dooming sellers to just superficially deal with all their customers, right? And as a result, what we see is they close 20%. Their win rate's 20%, or 20 to 25%. It's very, very, very typical in the SaaS world. And it's like, well, that's a problem. I mean, if you're in sales, which is a performance-based profession, and if we sort of accept the adage that practice makes perfect, if you're only winning 1 out of every 5 of your opportunities, what are you practicing the most?
Practicing, I guess. You're practicing losing. You're practicing building a pipeline just so that you can close that 20%. Yeah, to lose, basically.
Right.
You're okay with that.
But everybody seems to be okay with that. It's like, why?
I'm not saying you should be okay with that, but yeah, that's what people are okay with.
I have conversations with CROs where I'm going to say, well, what are you going to do to, here's your win rate. What are you going to do to grow sales this year? We're going to put more stuff in the top of the pipeline because our process, we know it works, and it's going to produce a 20% win rate. So, well, what's the value to you of increasing your win rate 1%, 2%? What's it mean to you? They never think about it. And it's just insanity. So we want to give people the ability to feel confident about what they're doing. Confidence comes from success. Give people the ability to succeed. Let them succeed some more. So instead of engineering our processes to generate 20% win rates, engineer your process to generate a 50% win rate. What will that look like? And I can tell you, your sellers will be more motivated. They're not going to be experiencing as much burnout. I mean, we have the ability to do this. This is part of what I'm talking about this in my new book, is like, we need to rethink, because we're fundamentally doing things the same way we were doing them for decades, and they're not working in better.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, as a leader, you're always on the lookout for more ways to arm yourself with knowledge. The books, the seminars, and most importantly, the podcasts that help you make the best possible decision for you, your company, your customers. Because when you know more, you can apply more and you can grow. With HubSpot's CRM platform, you can store, track, manage, and report on all the tasks and activities that make up your relationships with customers. With a bird's eye view over all your customer interactions, HubSpot empowers your decision making like never before, so you can give your business and your customers all the good you've got. Learn how to make your business grow better at HubSpot.com. Okay, so that's a great point. So you're speaking to a CRO. A CRO understands the value of increasing that 20% close rate to 50%. Like you have that conversation, the numbers make sense. So how do you actually accomplish that? What's the actual strategy?
Well, we have to start with sort of rethinking how we enable sellers. Okay. So, sort of the common way that, let's say, a enablement person or a sales leader say, look, we've got some shortfalls in our performance and our execution. How are we going to make decisions about what we train people and how we upskill our people, how we educate our people? Excuse me. And generally, what do they do? Well, they'll look at the numbers, they'll see what we're doing. It could be win rates, could be, no decision rates. It could be whatever. We could analyze some lost deals. But the thing that doesn't ever happen is no one ever goes back and talks to the customer and said, what's been the experience, your experience with our sellers? Where did we help or where did we hurt in terms of helping you understand what your problem is and helping you define a path forward to achieve your most important outcome, desired outcome? No one sort of starts, let's start with that perspective, what the buyers need from us and for us to help them better.
This is all about listening to this is all, it seems like such common sense, right? It's all about just listening to the people that you're selling to.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's the core of it though.
Sure, but take it to a further degree. I was having a conversation a couple weeks ago with a senior sales leader that was putting together a job description for a position they were trying to hire for. And as sort of the usual laundry list of things, we're looking for a hunter, we're looking for, aggressive, and then sort of the general sales description. But I said, okay, well, these things that you're saying are a requirement. Have you asked one of your customers what they need your salespeople to be? What do they need from your sellers in order to help them move through their process and make their decision to buy from you? What do they need? Never yet talked to a sales leader who said, yeah, we've consulted with our buyers about that.
And they want an aggressive hunter style sales role that's going to hunt white space.
Ask a buyer, you want our guys to be a hunter, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we want your guys to be, that extrovert that's really push us. No.
Comfortable with rejection, 40 to 50 cold calls a day.
What they want is, I summarize it. Your buyers want curious, open-minded problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
what is it? So the actual title of the book, we can definitely plug it. Yeah. Sell without selling out, right? And I want to know what that means.
Surprisingly, I have one here. Well, to sell without selling out is, to me, we all recognize sort of these conventional, what I call salesy behaviors that make buyers cringe. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to sort of catalog some of them, and I talk about it in the book. I have a little chart that compares salesy versus non-salesy. Salesy, what I call it, is selling out is the salesy. Right. Okay. It's the behaviors that sort of the persuasion-driven behaviors that make buyers resist and cringe. And we know we know they do this, yet we continue to persist. Let me give an example. One example is we talk about persuasion all the time. We get people to be better at persuasion, and this is somehow a critical sales skill. There was a book published in 2020 by Jonah Berger, a professor at Wharton School, called The Catalyst, is about persuasion. And one of the interesting things he cites in the book is research that shows that as human beings, we, to a person, universally, resist being persuaded. It's innate behavior. We resist persuasion. So it stands to reason that, of course, that we would say, well, let's make persuasion sort of this hallmark of sales skills we want to train people in. Let's put them out in front of buyers, exercising some behavior that buyers universally resist. So what I argue in the book is that there's, the opposite of these salesy behaviors, what I call the selling out behaviors, with what I call selling in, which, when you think about it, is all these behaviors that buyers resist, that we know sort of the stereotypical bad sales behaviors, those are all learned behaviors. Mm-hmm. And the argument that I make in the book is that if you lean into innate human behaviors, connecting with a human being, being curious, being empathetic and understanding, being generous, giving of value, that these are innate human behaviors that we're all wired to do. And if we lean into these and lead with these with our buyers, then we stand a better chance of establishing a trust-based relationship that enables us to influence the choices, trade-offs, and decisions they make. And they're open to that influence. I mean, that's one of the key points is that there's a decision a buyer makes when you start dealing with them, where they make the decision. I call it the why you question. Why should I invest my time in you? Why should I trust you? Why should I give you my confidence? Why should I listen to you? It happens in every interaction, every situation you are in with the buyer. And when they answer that question, what they're answering is, am I going to basically give Scott the ability to influence me? That's what they're doing. They're opening the door to your influence. So in order to do that, you have to make that connection. You got to be interested in the other person. It can't just be about pitching your product. It's about, I want to understand what really is most important to you. I'm driven by that. And so I sort of frame the contrast on stark terms in the book. And this is, I think, is a disservice we do to sellers is they're basically trained to think, sellers, that their job is to go out and persuade somebody to buy their product. Whereas I believe a seller's job is to listen, to understand what's the most important thing to the buyer, and then help them get that. And so if you think your job is to go out and persuade somebody, well, it sort of stands to reason that you're going to be pitch oriented, right? I got to get my product out there. I got to persuade you that regardless of what your problem is, this is the answer. Whereas if you think your job is to go out and to listen first, to understand what's most important to that buyer, and then put together a plan to help them get that, then you're going to go down a different path. You're going to lean into your curiosity. You're going to lean into make sure you ask the sufficient number of questions that you really understand what this most important thing is, and that you understand it at a level that makes the customer feel like you've heard them and understood them, and that you give generously of the value that you need to be able to provide, whether it's through insights or content or whatever form that helps the buyer make progress toward making their decision.
Now, I want to understand one thing when it comes to these conversations that you're having with the buyer. Of course, you still only have so many hours in a day, so it's important that if you spend the time, there still has to be some sort of performance objectives. But I'm curious, does this conversation now extend to qualifying properly, targeting properly, and the importance of measuring intent that a buyer could have, so that the conversations are a little bit warmer when you get into them, when I'm getting on the phone for the first time, or the Zoom call or whatever?
Sure.
How important is that?
You want to take advantage of every bit of intelligence you can have about the buyer before you have these conversations. I mean, I don't want people to get the wrong impression from earlier. The problem is not the technology; it's how we use it, right? And so, you want to take advantage of, if you have intent data, you want to factor that in. You want to make sure you've done your homework sufficiently before you have those first calls, because I believe that you can't predict in advance which of the interactions you have with the buyer can have the most impact on them. So Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winning economist, psychologist, did some research and came up with this rule he called the peak end rule. And what that said was that based on people go through an experience, when they are coming back to make a judgment or a decision about that experience, is they basically take into account two primary factors. One is the peak experience or peak event during that experience, and the last event in that experience. And think about that from the perspective of sales, and go through think about the buying experience, is you can't predict in advance which interaction you have with a buyer is one that they'll consider the peak event. It could be. I had one client that years ago where he sort of really transformed how they responded to their inbound leads, and really beefed up their inside team, brought in some real product experts to help with it, were just by getting back to their prospects more quickly with people who really understood the buyer and their needs and could really help them move through their process more quickly. Yeah, they doubled the revenue in almost no time. And when you surveyed the buyers, it was all about that, right? Their experience is that first interaction was the peak event for the buyer. It wasn't anything subsequent to that. It's the fact we got back to you quickly with somebody that really knew what they're talking about. I felt that was a great use of my time as a buyer to talk with them. Boom. So as a seller, you want to take advantage of everything that's available to you to say, yeah, I want to maximize the impact of each of my interactions. So I need to be very thoughtful about it. I need to be intentional about it. I just can't be robotic and sort of roll through my process. I got to treat every customer uniquely and prepare for them uniquely. And when I do that, yeah, there's going to be more value for the buyer in each of those interactions. And value, as I talk about in the book, for me, the baseline measure of value in the buyer's eyes is that as a result of an interaction with you, Scott, they're closer to making a decision after that interaction than they were before that interaction. But they've made progress. That's what buyers want. They want to make progress. If they don't see a return on the investment of their time and attention in you, then they'll stop giving you time.
And
So
to
it
follow
becomes
up with,
sort of,
go ahead, sorry.
once it just sort of becomes sort of the basic way that sellers have to look at every interaction they have with a buyer is, what is the value I'm going to provide? What's the value the buyer needs from me in order to make progress during this interaction? And if as a result of getting this value, what are they going to commit to doing as the next step?
The reason I wanted to go into this is because I think it's interesting because we touched on productivity before. And when you look at the concepts of productivity and efficiency, and then you contrast that with uniqueness and individualness, usually those run contrary. Usually the more unique something is, the less efficient it is. And that's what I was curious about, because if you want to be a top performer, there has to be some velocity to what you're doing. You have to be closing bigger deals or larger deals or more deals than the next person. So how do you make sure that you maintain velocity, you maintain productivity, but you still maintain uniqueness? And you kind of mentioned it there. You did touch on it. It was every single interaction you give and deliver the most possible value, and that in theory would move things along faster than even if you systematize it.
Right. That's your baseline. Is, does this interaction help the buyer move closer to making a decision? And if it doesn't, if you don't know that in advance, if you don't know how that's going to happen in advance, then why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Why are you taking the buyer's time? Why are you taking your time? And this is the mindset that sellers need to have when they go through, every opportunity in their pipeline. Or if you're a sales manager, you're going through a pipeline review. This is the question you ask your sellers. What value does the buyer need from us now in order to move forward in their process? And if a seller doesn't know, then they need to go back, keep asking questions, dig deeper, make sure they really understand. This understanding, I'd say there are four main pillars in my book. There are four main pillars of selling in: connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. And if you've built the connection, if you've built this level of trust, which is basically the customer giving you permission to stick your nose into their business, to ask the questions, make sure you understand. Don't just default to your usual set of 10 or 12 questions that you ask, but keep digging till you really feel like you understand. Confirm it with the buyer, as people are trained to do, but then you have to go a step further. This is where many sellers just stop. They may say, okay, well, I've asked these 10 questions. I'm going to, reflect those back to the buyer. But the thing is, the buyers don't always understand completely what the opportunities are or what even the scope of their problem is. So when you get a chance to reflect back to the buyer, sellers need to get in the habit of saying, okay, now what are we missing? Just when you think we understand everything, what are we missing? And that opens up the door again to dig deeper until you really feel like okay, I understand what's most important to the buyer. I understand what's driving the decision. Because in my experience in selling very complex, large-scale deals, as well as small deals early in my career, I learned early on that there's always one thing that's driving the decision more than everything else. And that one thing is usually important to one or more people. So as a seller, as part of your discovery, which is not a one-time event, it's something you do every time you interact with the buyer as you keep asking questions and learning, you're trying to uncover what that one thing is. What's the thing that's most important to the buyer? And who is it most important to? And so many sellers just don't have a handle on that. And so it's, they're sort of shooting craps to that point, sort of playing the odds.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, swag.com. Now, if you've ever received a corporate gift or swag in the past, how many of those gifts did you actually keep? Probably not many, which is probably because the stuff that you got was not so great. I've gotten a lot of stuff from trade shows and from companies in the past that I've just thrown out the second I get it. So this is why you need to check out swag.com. I've been on the receiving end of getting garbage gifts. I've also worked in companies where I only had access to a really, really small inventory of stuff that I wanted to give my customers and my employees, and I knew that it wasn't going to resonate. I knew that it was going to suck. So what is swag.com? Well, it's like swag upgraded. It's the best place to buy custom gifts and swag that people will actually want to keep. So they sent me a box because obviously they're sponsoring the show and I wanted to see what it's all about. I've worked in businesses. I want to make sure that the quality of their stuff actually was up to my standards, because I can tell you right now that when I get garbage, it goes right into the trash. It really goes right into the trash the second I get back from the trade show or the conference or whatever. So I received one of the custom swag boxes from swag.com. I loved the unique packaging, so it was a beautiful unboxing experience. I love the actual products they sent me, and there's a whole bunch more that obviously they didn't send me, but the stuff that they did send was absolutely beautiful. It was very high quality, and I can only imagine that if I actually got this when I was working for companies, I probably would have actually used it. And to be honest, I'm going to start using them for people that work on my show and in my company as well, because I know that this isn't just a novelty gift that somebody's going to throw out. It's stuff that they can actually use. They have so many unique and customizable gifts that I've never seen anywhere else. They have custom yoga mats. They have custom Apple AirPods. They even have branded kayaks, which I did not know was a thing. So they carry all these premium brands like North Face, Yeti, Nike, and more. And it's all customizable with your company's logo or artwork. With swag.com, they take care of all of your swag at their warehouse and they ship it to individual addresses. Or if you prefer, you can just send it to a bulk location in one single shipment. It's easy to manage from their online portal, which you obviously get access to. So if this is something that you think would benefit you, if you have clients or customers or a team and you want to go the extra mile and you actually want to give gifts that people appreciate, which is the whole point of giving these gifts in the first place, go to swag.com for the perfect swag and custom gifts. Right now, they're giving everybody who's a Success Story podcast listener a special offer. It's 10% off your entire order, but only when you go to swag.com/success and enter promo code success10. Remember, for 10% off, go to swag.com/success and use promo code success10. If you were going to hope that a seller or a sales manager or an entrepreneur or whoever reads this book takes one thing away from the book, what is the main thing that you want that person to take away? Do you want them to, for example, a seller, go to a new organization, or is it like this is the environment that you should aim to create in your organization, in your company? I guess I want to look at it from different perspectives of somebody reading this book and they already have a job or they already manage a team.
Right. Well, I think from an individual contributor standpoint, and this could be from an entrepreneur too, who's driving sales in their organization, is to understand what your job is. This is the big takeaway. Your job's not to persuade somebody to buy your product. Your job is to listen to them, to understand what's the most important thing to them, and then help them get that. That's your job. And the way to do that is not through these overly prescriptive, persuasion-based tactics, but through leaning into your innate human side to connect with someone at the human level, to use your curiosity to navigate through their problem, their situation, make sure you understand what's most important to them, how you can help them get that, and then provide them the value they need in order to help them make that decision. And it's much more collaborative. You think about selling not as something you do to someone, but something you do with someone. And so for individual contributors, that mindset to me is life altering for them, because they're gonna have a choice. Every time they have an opportunity to take a specific action, to say, do I want to be salesy? Do I want to sell out, or do I want to lean into the human side and sell in? For a manager, it's a cultural thing. Is because as more and more sellers embrace this way of selling, you're gonna get a little bit of pushback. They're gonna say, this overly prescriptive robotic process you want me to follow, that just doesn't work for me. And I think I can do better if I'm given the opportunity to experiment and come up with a way of selling that's aligned with who I am, my character, my values, my strengths. And as a leader, you should want to encourage that. You should want people not to be cookie cutters, clones of each other, but you want people that are motivated to become the best version of themselves. And to do that, you need to give them some autonomy. And this is I cite this research in the book, but professor at Harvard Business School, Francesca Gino, has written about this, is the power of giving people agency over the choices they make about how they sell. Then they own it, right? It's not imposing a process on somebody. It's they have ownership in this. They're going to be more motivated to want to be on top and stay on top. And so it's going to require a little bit of a shift of mindset in managers as well. A little bit, I don't want to say it's, it's not old school, but it's understand that your sellers are sort of like your buyers. As a manager, you want to understand what's most important to your individual sellers, and then say, how can I help you get that? That's my job. What do you aspire to, Scott? How can I help you get that? It's not, how can I make you make 50 calls? Maybe Scott only needs to make 20 calls, and that's okay. If Scott's delivering, that's fine. But there's this real sense of fear among many sales managers that if people deviate from the process, it's like, I can't have that. That's unpredictable. And it's like, well, that's fine. You're going to get better performance. Deal with it. Deal with people as individuals.
And then that's an interesting point. I want to ask some rapid fire questions at the end, but before we go into that, there's one point that I thought would be very interesting for somebody who is a sales manager who's listening to that, who said, okay, I'll try and deviate from process that I've done for the past 20 years, but what if somebody isn't performing? What if it's not working? How do I measure what's not working if I don't understand the process anymore?
So what are you judging people on? Right? I mean, is everybody has their own number.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody has their own set of metrics. It's always been the case. It frustrates me no end to talk to sellers. I'll say, well, what's your win rate? I don't know. What are your conversion rates? It's at your stages. No. What's like, you don't have to be driven by the numbers, but we all have numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about experimentation and improving, become the best version of yourself, it's within the scope of what your numbers are. Yeah, I said I sold, by and large, really large deals. 7-figure, 8-figure, even 9-figure deals. I knew what my numbers were. I knew what my win rate was. And I wanted to maintain those. Mine was different than the guy next to me. And he was good too. Mm-hmm. But he did it differently. And that's fine. You can accommodate that. I don't understand when managers think that they don't have time to accommodate. It's like, you've got nothing but time. If you're a frontline manager, your only job is to help your people succeed, and not succeed by doing it necessarily your way, but helping them learn how to become the best version of themselves. And if that's slightly at odds, so what? As long as people are willing to be held accountable for results. And that's a bargain I always made with bosses throughout my career. It's like, yeah, I may do things a little bit differently, but I'm willing to be held accountable for my results. And I delivered because I felt I had ownership in how I was selling.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was, my business, right? When I got started in sales, it's very common. You're taught by your manager. You're the CEO of your patch, right? Whether it's geography, you don't hear that as much anymore. And we need to enable sellers more and more to think about that as, you are the CEO of that small little business. What are you going to do to make it happen? Because failure is not an option.
And the last thing that I noticed, it was very interesting. The 4 pillars that you mentioned: connection, curiosity, understanding, generosity. None of those are focused on business objectives. None of those are focused on internal business metrics that will drive success. These are all focused on the customer.
Yeah. Shocking, huh?
No, it's very good. Okay. Most importantly, if people
Yes.
want to connect with you, get the book,
Yes.
where should they go? All the socials and the dates and all that.
Sure. So you can pre-order the book. Well, depending on when this airs,
Yeah.
we'll say you can order the book, your favorite online bookseller. And the book is launching February 22nd. We'll have a little bit of a launch event if people want to participate in that. Book is called Sell Without Selling Out, A Guide to Success on Your Own Terms. And if you want to follow me, I dabble on LinkedIn a bit. Scott's laughing. Yeah, he's sort of like me. We're there all the time. Got a podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul. Gosh, we're up to 1,000+ episodes, and encourage people to check that out.
Amazing. Okay.
And you can visit my website, andypaul.com.
That's where you get everything else. If you want to find anything, go there. Okay. Let's do a couple rapid fire.
Sure.
Biggest challenge that you've overcome in your personal or professional life. What was that? How did you overcome it?
Gosh. Which one?
Pick one. Pick one. One that comes to mind. The first one that comes to mind.
Well, I think the hardest thing in personal life was just a divorce. I mean that
impacts everything.
Impacts everything you do. And my first marriage was these things don't happen overnight. They evolved, and I just look back and think, there was a period of time there where I thought I was operating at peak performance, but I really wasn't in retrospect. And also people could see. So, so resolving all that and coming out the other end, divorce, great co-parenting between the two of us, great relationship. I think that's non-business, but it's something I was proud of.
Good. If you had to choose one person, there's obviously been many people, but one person who has had a huge impact on your life. Who was that, and what did they teach you?
Well, I really think it's my wife, second wife. Somebody we had known each other forever, reconnected after 30 years. One of those stories. But she's supported me down this journey that I've taken the last 8-9 years of exploring writing books and the podcast and everything else I've done with the business. That was just sort of a right turn, and would not have been possible without her support.
A book, podcast, something you'd recommend people go check out?
Other than my own?
Other than your own, yes.
Well, I think there's a couple books I'd recommend. One is A Moment to Think, I believe it's titled, by Juliet Funt. Talks about the importance of building white space or thinking time into your day. And for busy people, I think hugely important. I love Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think it's something I refer to in my book. I think that's a guide that people should pick up and take very seriously, because he writes very well about habit formation. And what's the other part of that question?
Oh no, just you
Okay,
got two of it already. You're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. Okay.
You can list off more if you want, but no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
If you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Get a degree in engineering.
It's not a bad. It's not a bad tip. Oh, very good. And then last question: what does success mean to you?
Control over my life, my time. That's for me is yeah, I've been extremely fortunate in my career. I mean, I've worked hard but yeah, for me, it was always about having control over my life. When I started my company, because I wanted to take a step back. Actually, yeah, I've been traveling extensively for 15 years internationally, and was missing a lot of things in my kids' life and lives, and so yeah, made the choice to sort of step back a bit. I was fortunate. I had the ability to be able to do that. I mean, I still was working and building my business, but at a much different pace. So for me, that's what success has been about is control.